Hello everyone. So last few days I have seen some really bad pictures come out of Sudan and read stories of grotesque, heart-wrenching sexual violence of and trigger warning, this video is going to contain mentions of SA. So if you're not comfortable, please don't go ahead. Okay. So I have read about several grotesque stories of sexual violence, of rape being used as a weapon of war, as a means of humiliation, as a means of proper humiliation by one group onto the other group. And it has soured my mind and made me very sad. So I want to take this time today, not away from what is happening, but I want to share a story from my life. Uh, this was about, and I keep coming back to this story again and again. Anytime I hear about rape being used as a weapon of hatred against women, I keep coming back to this story. You could say this was when I ate my apple, when I became aware of the way that a lot of men think and how that way facilitates, it paves way for rape as being used as a weapon of humiliation against the victim. So the victim who is being assaulted has the burden of shame, and the perpetrator has no burden of shame. There is a particular kind of thinking which I was not aware of, and it made no sense to me. But this incident kind of, it gave me a glimpse into the mind of this kind of a man who thinks like this. So this is around like 10, 11 years ago. I was seeing someone and much older, and there were a lot of problems. But this person was a staunch Hindu, which I don't have a problem with. I am not particularly religious, but I don't have a problem with people who are serious about their religions. Staunch Hindus, staunch Muslims, I don't care as long as I like them as a person, and was Indian, but apparently had been born and brought up in the US. Um, Spoke a lot about him loving India, but never wanted to go back there because he thought India was not good enough for him. The streets were dirty, and you could not kiss your girlfriend on the street. You had no freedom, so never wanted to go back, but always took a lot of pride in his Indian identity and Hindu identity, which is not a problem. But also, he used to shit talk about Muslims a lot. And this started eventually when he became comfortable. And I was not that kind of a person. And I was uneasy with the way he used to talk about Muslims sometimes. Now, this is not a Hindu Muslim thing because Hindus, when we gather, when our families gather, if not us, they do have certain stereotypes about Muslims. Muslims, when they gather, they do have certain stereotypes about Hindus. Christians have stereotypes about other religions. This is a very, like, it's not a religion specific thing. We all have biases. But I am not particularly religious, and it made me uncomfortable the way he spoke about Muslims sometimes. So one day I asked him, what if I was a Muslim? I could have been a Muslim and you would never have known because I am not particularly religious, and I know a lot of Muslim girls my age who are like me personality wise. There's not a whole lot of difference. To which, within less than 2 seconds, he responded, if you were a Muslim, then I would sweet talk you, I would have sex with you, and if you refuse to have sex with me, I would rape you. And then the next day, I would go back to my friends and I would brag about how I fucked a Muslim girl. This is what he said. Within 2 seconds, I said, but what if I was a Muslim in a very casual, I was a Muslim girl in a very casual sense in order to engage in a dialogue. And before I could finish my thought, he had said all of this. I would fuck you either with your wish or without your wish. I would either fool you into having sex with you, or I would rape you. And then I would go back to my friends and I would brag about how I fucked a Muslim girl. And he said it with a completely straight face, with pride, with spite. You know, spite. Like you have been told that you should feel shame about something, but you refuse to feel shame. So that was his, like, I refuse to feel shame. This is my thought process. And I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud of the way I feel. He looked me in my eye and said all this. And I was the woman who had given him a space in my life because he was sweet. And he sweet talked himself into getting a seat in my life. And in front of me, he is saying that if I was Muslim, he would, just the way he had sweet talked himself into having space in my life, he would make me trust him. He would then use that trust to have sex with me. And if I said no, he would assault me. And then the next day he would go and brag in front of his friends that he fucked a Muslim girl. The reason I am repeating this again and again is that this is more than a decade ago. And this remains one of the most painful memories of my life. And one of the most defining memories, because this was not the first, but one of the many strings of instances where I had a major perspective shift. My idea of sex was very closely associated with my idea of romance. And India is a very closed up society, at least it used to be. The exposure was very less. So your idea of sex and love, it all came from the movies or the books you read. You didn't have as much of an insight into the mind of the opposite sex as I think a person of a similar age would have today. So even though just listening to that sentence, it was so ugly, I had this visceral reaction in my body and I was like, what the fuck? And this is a very well educated guy. This is a physical therapist in US. So people would come to him, both men and women, to get physical therapy. And you will never anticipate that he will say something like this. And he is very proudly telling me how he would have raped me if I was a Muslim girl. And he would have bragged about that in front of his friends the next day. The thing is, as I was saying, India is such a closed society. You don't have a lot of insight into how the opposite sex thinks. I didn't have it for a very long time. I couldn't decode or I couldn't break down that sentence because I was like, but if you think that Muslims are disgusting, why would you want to have sex with a Muslim woman? If I think someone's disgusting or beneath me, the last thing I want to do is I want to have sex with them. And if you rape someone, how are you going to go to your friends and brag about it? How is the shame? It's almost like they think that they soiled you. You know, like you get soiled, as I have mentioned in one of my previous videos. But at that age, like I could not figure out, if you rape someone, and how are you going to go and brag in front of your friends? Will your friends not judge you? And if you think that someone is beneath you, why are you going to want to have sex with them? Not only are you talking about having sex with them, you're talking about winning that person's trust. You are talking about winning that woman's trust, taking her in confidence, proving to her that you're a good and reliable person, and then in your mind soiling her, because you don't get soiled, but the other gender does get soiled when you have sex with them. And then you go and brag to your friends about it. I couldn't understand. My only reaction was, what the fuck? And then I didn't even want to process what was said because I didn't understand what was being said. But more than 10 years later, at the age of 30, unfortunately, I have to say that I understand exactly what he meant. And I understand exactly why sexual violence and rape is used as a weapon of humiliation against women. In any major conflict, in any major war, even when people are fighting in the name of religion, when Hindus and Muslims are fighting each other, when Hindus and Christians, when Muslims and Christians, when Christians and non Christians, I, at the risk of sounding pessimistic, I think the overarching conclusion I reached was that, and this is one of the things, but not the only thing, but one of the things that drove me away from religion. First of all, if you are a man of God, it doesn't matter which God, you do not have fantasies about raping women. If you are a man of God and you fantasize about, and you're not even physically overpowering them, dude, like you're saying that you're going to sweet talk them and win their trust, you're going to manipulate them. It is somehow, I never thought I would say that, but it is somehow so much more pathetic and disgusting than a person who physically overpowers someone to assault them. It is like, it's insane. The depravity, the rottenness in the mind is insane. And I wish the 19-year-old me who had very Bollywood like dreams of what love and what romance meant and how men looked at women, a part of me wishes I had not come in contact with that, because it fundamentally changes your brain chemistry. If after 11 years I still remember the exact words told to me, and I remember that the words came from a very well educated man, a man who claimed that he believed in God, a man who was a very proud Hindu but could have been a Muslim and could have been a Christian, doesn't matter, or Buddhist. I had a shift of perspective, and it's like the first shock. Like I said, I had my apple. I understood that, but I didn't understand it then because it was too foreign of a concept that men could use sex as a weapon of hatred. This concept itself was too foreign for my mind at that age. But at this age, very unfortunately, it's not foreign. And anytime I read about men using sexual violence as a means to humiliate women in situations of war, in situations of riots. I always am reminded of the first time I was introduced to this idea that sex is not about romance. In fact, the times when it is about romance and mutual attraction and love are rare. It is very often a statement of dominance. It is very often a statement of, I can fuck you. Like we say also, we use that word fuck as a means of like dominating someone, as a means of destroying someone. I am taken back to this memory. This was one of my first memories, followed by many, many, many others, which overarchingly I came to this conclusion that a Hindu man hates women, a Muslim man hates women, a Christian man hates women. They use their faith very often as a garb so that they can play out the extremely violent and depraved fantasies they have against women onto them in real life. So it can come out of your imagination and it can play out in your real life. And this happens in when India and Pakistan got separated. In Pakistan and Bangladesh got separated. I implore you to please give me one major religious fight or a civil war that was a result of religion where one faction is fighting for my belief in God and the other faction is fighting for my belief in God, and millions of women have not been raped or have not been subjected to brutal violence. There is not even a single war, even when it's fought in the name of God, even when it's fought in the name of religion. This is one of the most painful memories of my life because I consider myself an introvert, which means there is a fair degree of vetting process before I allow someone within my inner circle. And just the fact that this civilized, educated man, youngish man, who had finished his school, who had apparently grown up in the US, where women and men have very different equations, who could speak English, who was a doctor for God's sake. This man, this is the kind of fantasy he has about what he would do to a woman if she belonged to another religion. He would soil her by putting his dick inside of her, because that's what happens when a man has sex with a woman, right? She gets soiled. And then he would go and brag about it to his friends. I am trying to make a video discussing in details the situation in Sudan and the historical context. And until then, I want you all to remember this man who bragged about how he would rape me if I was a Muslim, and he did it with impunity and defiance, and he looked into my eyes when he did it, and in the next moment he went back to sipping his juice. This man is still probably practicing as a doctor, is maybe very well respected in his community, is perhaps now dating a woman who has no fucking clue of the depravity in his mind. With this thought, I want to leave you all. He is well and he is happy and he is not alone. He is a representation of millions of men who can be Hindus, can be Muslims, can be Christians, can be Buddhists, can be atheists, who have very violent, misogynistic and depraved thoughts about women, and they are proud of those thoughts. They have impunity. They believe that they deserve to keep those thoughts. And they are in positions of power, well respected and adorned by communities. Thank you.